Okay, we're starting Module 7, which is called Understand and Apply Percents. And Lesson 1 is Understand, Express, and Compare Percent Ratio. So that's what we're looking at today. And we're going to start with this first part on the left-hand side with Lesson 1. Now, if you wanted to find this in your book, you can find the same type of questions around page 206 is when we're starting here. So let's look at the first one. There is only one vocabulary word in this lesson, and it's percent. Percent, right here, is a ratio that compares a number to 100. It is represented by the percent symbol, which is this right here. Now, a percent is out of 100. That's what we score tests at. Like if you got 98%, that's 98 out of 100. Let's look at our first question. Eleanor, Tilly, and Caleb earn money training dogs to surf. For every dollar they earn, Caleb gets 20 cents. Tilly gets 30 cents, and Eleanor gets 50 cents. A says write a ratio that shows how much each trainer earns from a dollar. So a dollar, there's 100 cents in it. So all we're going to do is we're going to take Caleb's, which is this 20 right here. We're going to put a 20. Tilly was 30, so 30 out of 100. And Eleanor was 50, so we have 50 out of 100. Caleb's portion of each dollar earned is shaded on the 10 by 10 grid. So when we have a 10 by 10 grid, that means there's 100 squares on here. So Caleb's shaded in this blue on your paper. I just printed them in black and white, so it's not blue, it's just a darker color. So Caleb is 20, so that's 2 lines. How many boxes do you need to shade to represent Tilly's portion? If we look right up here, Tilly's portion is 30, so that means we need to shade in 30 blocks or 3 lines, and that's my beautiful shading. Those of you that are more artistic, you can shade a little nicer than I am and maybe the rest of your classmates. Now, they only said to do Caleb and Tilly's. We haven't done anything with Eleanor yet. Eleanor's is going to come in the next couple questions. A percent is a part to whole ratio. So the example of Caleb's, the part is 20 to the whole is 100. It's kind of like when we were doing our angle measure problems in the last chapter. And with a percent, we're always going to have 100 be our whole because that's what it's out of to get a percent. You can write 25% as 25 over 100, or like this right here. So remember when you're writing a ratio, a colon is one way to write a ratio. Write percents to represent the amounts Caleb and Tilly earned from each dollar. So Caleb was 20 out of 100, and so that is 20%. Tilly was 30 out of 100, and so since 30 is written over 100, that's our percent. So we get 30% there. D, what does the part of the grid that isn't shaded represent? So we're just going to talk about this. We're not going to have to write it down. So the portion of the dollar that is left after Caleb and Tilly takes their earnings. So this extra spot, that's what's left over once they take their earnings of the dollar. And so what's left over, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines. That is 5 lines out of 10 would be 50% of it. And that would be not Tilly's portion. I'm sorry, that would be Eleanor's earnings or her portion. Okay, let's go up to the top of the next side, right here. A survey says that 13 out of 20 people have a pet. We're going to write that as a ratio. One way to write a ratio as a percent is to use a table. Complete the table to write the equivalent ratios for the ratio 13 over 20. So most of you guys like tables. If it's drawn for you, use it. If they don't have one drawn, you're not going to have to solve it this way. When we do equivalent, that means they need to be equal. So remember to get from 20 to 40, we multiply by 2. We multiply by 2 there. We're going to do the same thing up here. So we get 26. Okay, so we have 20, 40, 60, 80, 100. And up here, we'd count by 13. So 13, 26, 39, 52, and then 65. So 65 out of 100. B, use the table to write the percent of people who own pets. What is 13 over 20 as a percent? And if we look at this very last one, we have 65 over 100. And so this top number, since it's over top of 100, that's our percent. So we have 65%. C, you can also use equivalent ratios to find the percent. What is 13 over 20 as a percent? This right here is the way you're going to be doing most of the time, because we have done things like this before, and you won't, if there's not a table, you're not going to take the time to draw the table. So we're going to look at this. Here is our ratio that they're asking us, and we want to change it to percent. We put 100 on the bottom because percents are out of 100. 20 times 5 is 100. If I multiply by 5 on the bottom, I'm going to do the same thing on top. 13 times 5 is 65. So this is like saying you scored 13 points out of 20 on assignment. That means you got 65%. So this right here, in real life situations, it can help you determine what percent that you got on your assignment instead of just being like, oh, I missed 5. I wonder what that is. The next one, a recipe for pie crust includes the ingredients shown. So I have that right here. Find the ratio of sugar to flour. So we have 1 cup of sugar per 4 cups of flour. What fraction can represent the ratio of sugar to flour? They asked for sugar first, so I'm going to put 1 because we have 1 cup. And then we have 4 cups of flour, so 1 over 4. Now, it says convert this fraction to a decimal. And we've kind of done this before, but not too much, so I want you to take consideration how to do it. The number one way that you can always do it is just take the top number and divide it by the bottom number. And when we type that in our calculator, we get 0.25. And that's what we get. It says explain how you did it. I kind of worked that out here. I took the numerator and I divided it by the denominator. Anytime you want to change a fraction into a decimal, you just take the top number and divide it by the bottom number and you got it. Now, D, write the decimal as a percent. So there are several ways that we can do this. One way is saying that 5 is in the 100 spot. So that's 25 over 100. Since that number is sitting on top of 100, our percent is 25%. The other way you could have done it, let me change my color for this one, is our decimal is 0.25. When you change a decimal into a percent, you just multiply by 100. And to make that easier for yourself, all you have to do from a decimal to a percent, you just move your decimal 2 times to the right. So that still gets you 25%. So there are several ways that you can do that. It just depends on which way that you like to do it best. Let's flip over to our next page. And let me zoom in. Let's look at this first one. We're right here. The diagram shows quiz results in red for John. John got 20 out of 25, and Vince, he got an 82.5%. Who received the higher score, Don or Vince? So what we need to do is we need to change them both into fractions or both into percent. So we're going to convert them to the same form. Let me change this to black so it's not hard to see. Convert to same form. And on most problems, that's going to be up to you to decide which one that you want to do. But right now, they have a double number line set up for you here, so let's look at our double number line. Many test scores are written as percents, like Vince was. Use the double number line to convert John's score to a percent. John's score is a ratio with a whole of 25. So John got 20 correct out of 25. John scores a ratio, I already read that, sorry. So the 25 is placed with 100%. So if John would have got all of them right, he would have got a 25 out of 25, which is 100%. However, John only got 20 right, so he got an 80% there. Let me scroll down so we can look at it. To convert John's score to a percent, what number do you mark on the top of the number line? And that is the number 20. We already marked that right there. And then below it would be 80. Okay, now you're not going to sit there and draw out a double number line because that's going to take you extra time. But you can set it up like we normally do. We have 20 out of 25 because that's what John scored on the test. And we're going to put it out of 100 because percents are out of 100. To get from 25 to 100, I multiply by 4. If I multiply by 4 on the bottom, I'm going to do the same thing on the top. 20 times 4 is 80. And since 80 is sitting over 100 and percents are out of 100, it is 80%. So John scored an 80%. Vince scored at 82.5. Who received the higher score? That would be Vince because he was in the 82. Okay. Okay. Here's our next part. We're going to check understanding. I want you to see what you can do on the check understanding before you play this part to see if you can do something without me. If you need to look over back at your other ones, do that. But try the check understanding by yourself for a little bit, see what you can get done, and then start the video. So pause the video, and then when you're ready to hit play again, do that. Okay, first one, a basketball player made 12 out of 30 shots she attempted. What percent of shots did the basketball player make? So we got 12 out of 30. And we're going to turn that into a decimal because I can't make that 30 into a 100 easily. I'm just going to change it into a decimal. To make a fraction into a decimal, we just divide the top number by the bottom number. So 12 divided by 30 equals 0.4. Now, our next thing that we're going to do is to change a decimal percent. We move our decimal 2 times to the right. So I get 40%. So she made 40% of her shots. Our next ones, we're going to write each of these as a percent. There's some extra room down on here on the bottom, so if you need to use that, make sure you do that. This first one, I'm going to rewrite it right here. We have 1 over 20, and percents are out of 100. So that's why I put 100 over here. 20 times 5 is 100. 1 times 5 is 5. 5 is sitting over 100, so we have 5%. Okay, next one, I'm going to put 160 over 400. I can change 400 to 100 by dividing by 4. 160 divided by 4 is 40. Since 40 is sitting above 100, that's 40%. Next one, this is going to be a pretty small one. It's 5 to 250. So I'm going to take 5. On this one, I'm going to do decimal way. So I'm going to do 5 divided by 250. Now, you can choose whichever way that you want to do it. If you don't like setting them up like these fractions I had right here, you could just have taken 1 divided by 20. I want to go both ways so that way you can see the different ways that you can do this. So on our calculator, we're going to take the top number, which is 5, and we're going to say 5 divided by 250. When we do that, we get a decimal of 0.02. To change a decimal into a percent, we just move the decimal 2 times to the right, which is 2%. 45 over 75. I'm going to choose to divide that into my calculator. So I'm going to take the top number. I'm going to divide it by the bottom number. So I have 45 divided by 75. And I get 0.6. To change a decimal to a fraction, we move it, not a fraction, a decimal to a percent, we're going to move it 2 times to the right And this time we have this little blank spot. In that blank spot, we're going to put a 0. So we have 60%. Next one, 12 over 60. I'm going to take the top number, divide it by the bottom number. In my calculator, I'm going to do 12 divided by 60. And I get 0.2. To change a decimal to a fraction, we move it 2 times to the left. Now to the left, to the right, and we get 20%. And our last one, 1 divided by 8. My calculator, I'm taking 1 divided by 8. I get 0.125. To change the decimal to percent, we're going to 2 times to the right. So that is 12.5%. Let me make that decimal a little bigger there. And that's all you're doing right there on the check understanding. There are 2 ways that you can change a fraction to a percent. You can just divide them, the top number divided by the bottom number, and move the decimal over 2 times to the right, or you can get the bottom number to be 100. Now, making it 100 doesn't work 100% of the time, so I would just divide it on most of them. And let's head on to the last section. What do you remember? So I picked some problems from page 209 and 210 in here, not all the problems, just so we can kind of go over to see how you're doing with all of this stuff. So I want you to try some of these if you can by yourself. If not, just work along with me. But if you're going to try some by yourself, make sure after you're done that you come back and you watch to make sure that you're doing them just fine. Let's start with the first one, Ryan. Ryan got 36 out of 40 questions right on his test. Tessa got 92% of the same test. Who got a better score? So since Tessa already has a percent, I'm going to change Ryan's into a percent. So 36 out of 40, I'm going to do 36 divided by 40. And in my calculator, that tells me I got a 0.9. Once I have a decimal to change it in percent, I'm going to move my decimal 2 times to the right. Right here in this little blank, I'm going to put a 0. So I get 90%. Ryan got a 90, Tessa got a 92. Tessa, right here, better score. Only by 2%, but still a better score. Next one, write 3 ratios that are equivalent to 75% and 3 ratios that are equivalent to 100%. So let's take a look at these ratios. There's 3 ways to write ratios: as a fraction with colons or the word 2 between it. So here are some possible ones for 75%. I'm going to do 3 colon 4. I'm going to do 9 colon 12. And my last one, I'm going to do 150 to 200. Now, that doesn't mean that's all of them. That's just some of the possibilities. There's tons of them. Now we're going to find 3 that are equivalent to 100%. So to get 100%, that means it has to be the same number at the front and back. So I'm just picking some numbers out that can be that. As long as your first number here is the same as your second number, that is a ratio that's equivalent to 100%. Okay, this middle one, we're going to write each number as a percent. So I'm taking 3 divided by 24 here. I'm typing it into my calculator. I got 0.125. To change the decimal over, I go 1, 2. So that's 12.5%. Okay, 0.95 is already written as a decimal, so all we're going to do is go 1, 2. I get 95%. This one's already written as a decimal. We're going to move it over 2 times to the right, so I get 837%. Okay, we haven't done one with a mixed number yet, but when you have a mixed number, take your whole number, put it on the line, cross it out in the problem, and then we're going to take 1 divided by 5 in our calculator, and we get 0.2. To To change a decimal into percent, we move it 2 times to the right. Right here, we put a 0. We're going to tack this 20 on right to that 6. So 6 1/5 is 620%. This next one, I'm going to change it to 100 on the bottom because I know that 50 times 2 is 100 and 70 times 2 is 140. So this is 140%. And our last one's a decimal, so all we have to do is move it 2 times to the right, and we get 34%. Then our last section down here, the ratio of 7th graders to 6th graders on a test team is 5 to 3. So since 7th graders is listed first, the 5 is the 7th graders. The 6th graders is second, so the 3 is the 6th graders. The ratio of 7th graders to total chess players is, so if we find the total, we have to do 5 plus 3, that is 8. So we have 5 over 8. What percent of the players on the chess team are 7th graders? So I'm going to take 5 divided by 8. And that is 0.625. To change the decimal into percent, we move it 2 times to the right. So I get 62.5%. And that's it on the first lesson.